Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to explore something fascinating about the human mind, and specifically, why it so deeply resists the very things we want most for ourselves. You know, it's strange. If you look at the data, most humans desperately want change, but their daily life stays almost exactly the same for years. Same habits, same thoughts, same routines, same distractions pulling them away from what truly matters. The truth is, I don't think the problem is a lack of desire. It almost never is. Most people genuinely want better health, better focus, better relationships, better careers, better lives. They spend hours visualizing this better future, feeling the genuine ache of wanting something more. But the gap between that intense emotional desire and their daily reality remains absolutely enormous. The real problem is this: humans try to change their life emotionally instead of systematically. We rely on a sudden burst of inspiration to carry us across the finish line. We watch one highly edited motivational video, and suddenly, the brain creates a 47-step life transformation plan. We tell ourselves that tomorrow is the day everything shifts. Tomorrow, we will be entirely new people, powered purely by this overwhelming feeling of motivation. But the reality is, emotion is a terrible engine for long-term transformation. The plan usually looks something like this. Wake up at 4 a.m., no snooze button, just straight out of bed into the freezing dark, relying entirely on willpower that hasn't even had its morning coffee yet. Then the list piles on. Meditate for an hour, journal 3 pages of deep reflections, read an entire chapter of a dense nonfiction book, build 6 businesses before noon, drink a terrible-tasting green juice, take a freezing ice bath, learn Mandarin, become entirely enlightened before breakfast. We overload the system because we equate the intensity of our emotional desire with our actual capacity to execute entirely new behaviors all at once. We try to maintain this perfectly optimized robotic schedule, and then, usually about 3 days later, the nervous system completely collapses. We crash, we burn out, and we end up right back exactly where we started, only now carrying the extra heavy weight of guilt and perceived failure. Because real change is not built through emotional intensity. It's built through repetition. In reality, this is where most people fundamentally misunderstand transformation. Humans think life changes through massive, dramatic, cinematic big moments, the grand epiphanies. But most real transformation happens quietly, in the background. Small repeated actions, repeated thoughts, repeated environments, repeated behaviors over long stretches of time. That's what actually slowly rewires identity. It's the unglamorous everyday rhythm that shapes us. Think about this carefully. If a person works out once, doing the most intense workout of their entire life, nothing fundamentally changes. You're just sore the next day. But repeat a moderate, manageable workout for 1 year, different body, different physical confidence, a completely different baseline for your nervous system. Similarly, one 3-hour hyper-focused work session changes very little in the grand scheme of your career. But consistent deep work for just an hour a day over several years, completely different life. That's how systems work. Systems are basically repeated behaviors that systematically reduce chaos in your daily life. They remove the need for constant, exhausting decision-making. You don't have to consciously choose to be motivated. The system just automatically carries you forward. Fundamentally, systems matter much more than motivation. Motivation is just a spark, but systems are the engine block that actually turns that spark into sustained forward momentum. We have to rely on systems because motivation changes constantly. Human emotions are incredibly volatile, influenced by everything from how much sleep you got last night to a stressful news headline to your blood sugar levels. Some days you wake up and you feel powerful, ready to conquer the world. Other days, your brain negotiates with you for 30 minutes just to open a single work email. That's totally normal. Humans are deeply emotional creatures, wired to seek immediate comfort and avoid energy expenditure, which is exactly why systems matter so much. Systems protect your progress when those perfectly natural emotional fluctuations occur. They are the guardrails on your life. And honestly, this might be the biggest mindset shift you can make. Think about this idea for a second. You do not rise to your goals. You fall to your systems. Because goals create direction. They tell you where you want to go. But systems create your daily reality. If there is a massive gap between your goals and your systems will win every single time. Now here's where things become fascinating biologically. And this is the core scientific mechanism behind it all. Every repeated action actively trains the nervous system. Humans often think habits are purely psychological, just a matter of willpower or discipline, but habits are profoundly neurological. The physical structure of your brain actually changes through repetition. This incredible process is called neuroplasticity, which basically means the brain adapts to what you repeatedly do. When you perform an action, a pathway of neurons fires in your brain. The more frequently that specific pathway fires, the thicker and more efficient the myelin sheath around those neurons becomes. It's like turning a dirt path into a massive paved highway. The brain desperately wants to conserve energy, so it physically rewires itself to make your most repeated behaviors incredibly easy and automatic. It doesn't judge whether the behavior is good or bad for you, it only responds to the frequency of the repetition. So let's look at how this plays out in modern life. Repeat distraction, and the brain's baseline becomes one of perpetual distraction. You are literally training your neural pathways to crave dopamine hits every 3 minutes, making it physically uncomfortable to sit still with your own thoughts. But the exact opposite is also true. Repeat focus, and the neural pathways for deep focus become physically stronger. You teach your brain to effortlessly sustain attention, building a neurological tolerance for deep work, problem solving, and calm presence. Focus becomes your default state rather than an agonizing struggle. Repeat avoidance, and the nervous system becomes incredibly resistant to any kind of discomfort. Every single time you turn away from a difficult task, you reinforce the neural pathway of running away, teaching your brain that you are fragile and that hard things are dangerous threats. But repeat disciplined action, and eventually, the brain starts accepting effort as entirely normal. You build a tolerance for friction. The resistance you feel when starting a task diminishes significantly because your brain expects it and knows exactly how to process it. And this is the profound part. That neurological shift is what changes your identity slowly over time. Ultimately, identity is the most critical piece of this entire puzzle, because humans always act in alignment with who they internally believe they are. Identity dictates behavior. If someone internally believes, I'm lazy, I always quit, I'm just a procrastinator, their actions will inevitably follow that specific identity. They will subconsciously self-sabotage to prove themselves right. But if someone repeatedly proves to themselves through tiny daily actions, I finish things, I train, I build, I create, their identity slowly shifts. They accumulate undeniable evidence that they are someone who shows up. And once identity changes, consistency becomes practically effortless. Not because life suddenly becomes magically easy or completely devoid of obstacles, but because those productive actions stop feeling completely foreign to your nervous system. They simply become who you are. I believe many people fail because they try to transform their entire life overnight, creating massive psychological friction. The brain hates sudden chaos, even positive chaos. It perceives it as a massive threat to its established neural pathways. This is exactly why small, sustainable, microscopic change works so much better. You slip right under the brain's threat radar. Tiny, consistent actions repeated long enough become immensely powerful. And yes, I completely acknowledge that this sounds much less exciting than those dramatic motivational speeches with intense cinematic music and a guy running up a mountain at sunrise. But real, enduring transformation is usually quieter than that. It looks like showing up repeatedly, even when motivation completely disappears, even when the results are frustratingly slow, even when nobody notices your effort yet. Because consistency compounds invisibly at first. It builds steadily beneath the surface. Then suddenly, one day, people look at you and they call it discipline, or success, or natural talent, all without ever seeing the thousands of boring, quiet, repeated actions behind it. And maybe that's the real secret we've uncovered here today. Life changes when repeated behaviors change, not when humans simply wish for a different future emotionally, or endlessly beat themselves up for failing to maintain an impossible standard. So maybe the goal is not becoming a perfect, fully optimized human overnight. Maybe the real goal is vastly simpler. Build quiet systems that make your own growth easier. Fiercely protect your attention from constant distraction. Train your nervous system slowly and patiently through neuroplasticity. Repeat meaningful actions, however small. And step by step, become someone your future self can deeply trust. Because the ultimate takeaway is this: a human who learns how to consistently direct their own mind, attention, and actions can completely transform their life over time. Not through overnight magic, not through fleeting emotional motivation alone, but through conscious repetition repeated long enough to become identity itself. So, what is one tiny, quiet system you can start repeating today to build the identity of your future self? See you in the next video.